Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminolly, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, horror, I've got reviews of a couple of small press horror books for you, which I think you'll really enjoy. So this is one of my small press spotlight videos where I talk about books from small presses or independently published or self-published authors that I've been sent. So I've got a few to go through with you today. I've got 4 that I've received recently and not read yet. And then the 2 that I showed at the start, which I'm going to do short reviews of. Okay, so first up I have this chapbook, Panic by Matt Wall, which looks absolutely fantastic. I've never read a chapbook before, so really looking forward to having a read of this and seeing what it's all about. But I love the kind of presentation and experience of reading something that is effectively homemade like this, rather than a mass-produced book. Secondly, I have this, Shark City Harbour by Darryl Pickett, which is a 70s set thriller, kind of definitely inspired by Jaws, and set in Martha's Vineyard, which Darryl very kindly sent me a copy of. So yeah, very much looking forward to reading this. It looks like a fun thriller, and I do really enjoy kind of 70s set crime stuff. And then next up, I have 2 books from Brian Bowyer. So I've reviewed a couple of Brian's books on the channel before, and he's brilliant. So he's a horror author who is incredibly creative and writes what you would term, I think, as extreme horror, in that it is, it can be really horrible and really graphic. But he does it in a way that doesn't feel exploitative. In the same way that lots of other extreme horror I've read does. So I think he's fantastic. I'm really looking forward to this. So I've got 2 books by him, both of which have absolutely fantastic covers, I have to say. So the first one is Perpetual Dread, which is a short story collection. Yeah, look at that cover. That's brilliant, isn't it? And the second one is a novel, Flesh Rehearsal, which again has an absolutely brilliant cover. And features a criminal called the Lobotomizer, which sounds fantastic. So I'm really, really looking forward to both of these. So thank you very much, Brian, for sending them to me. So in terms of reviews today, then, I've got 2 books for you, both of which were sent to me by the authors. And both the authors, I would say as well, are subscribers of the channel and regular commenters, and I really appreciate your support, both of you. You've been absolutely fantastic in the comments for months and months and months, so I really do always value and look forward to your comments. So the first book is Dogmeat by Priscilla Bettis. So this is a really interesting book, and it's not quite what I was expecting. So I think I was expecting a horror book, and it is a horror book, but it's not a normal horror book by any means. So it is set in the 80s in a very oppressive society, which I think is modelled on the People's Republic of China, and it has a really dystopian feel to it. And I think when we use the word dystopian, increasingly we tend to think of science fiction. We think of things like The Hunger Games as dystopian fiction, but actually, dystopian just means an oppressive society, and that's definitely what this book is about. So it features a central character called Ward, whose job it is to slaughter dogs for a restaurant. So he kills and butchers dogs that then get served as meat in a restaurant, and it's a job that he's very good at, but that he hates. And the book is about him trying to break away from that job in a society where individuals are, told what their job should be. So it features some incredibly horrific and brutal scenes. And if you are a dog lover, you may well not want to read this book. But it's enormously effective as well. And Ward's struggle to break away from the kind of future that has been destined for him by the society he lives in is really moving. Priscilla Bettis, the author, does a really good job of pulling you into the story. And this is a novella; it's not long, but she manages to build up a huge amount of meaning and emotion in a fairly short number of pages. She throws in kind of flashbacks and things like that towards Ward's past, and particularly his teenage years. So I think he's kind of in his 20s in the book. So you learn a lot more about the society and how it functions through those flashbacks. And you also learn about kind of the future direction that the authorities are trying to take the society in. So there's an incredible scene where like American tourists have come over and are observing what's going on and being like, you know, really hateful towards Ward because of what he does as a job. And clearly it's something he has very little control over. So yeah, a really fascinating book about oppression. You know, as I say, very horrible and disturbing at times, but very moving at other times. And I really, really enjoyed reading about Ward and his, you know, his kind of struggles to make the kind of life he wants for himself in a society that's trying to dictate his life to him. So quite different from many books that I read, but a very, very good book, and definitely worth checking out if you like that kind of darker, dystopian, disturbing type of book. As I say, I thought this was really fantastic, and it's definitely worth reading. Okay, next up is something very different, but equally good. The Forsaken Boy by Troy Tradup. So this is a fairly traditional feeling novel in terms of its, you know, its form. It's got a 3-act structure, and you know, just the way the story unfolds, but with some really interesting ideas in it, and just a fantastic degree of craftsmanship to it that made it a real pleasure to read. So it's a werewolf book. It's about a young guy called Brandon who's half Caucasian, half Native American, who lives in Minnesota, and he's kind of on the cusp between his teenage years and his adulthood. So I think he's kind of in his final year of high school, and he is he lives with his father and stepmother, and they're like really awful people. So he has a terrible home life. He's bullied at school, and you know, like can't get a girlfriend, and all that kind of you know, the kind of stuff that teenagers go through, I guess. And the book is about him encountering a werewolf, and you know, getting attacked by that werewolf, and getting the, you know, the kind of powers you expect someone who's been attacked by a werewolf to get, and how that kind of transforms his life. So it ends up being something that he welcomes, that he, you know, gets benefit out of, because it allows him to give him power where he has in the past felt powerless. So it was a really interesting take on that. And Brandon is a really well crafted character, you know, really engaging to read. I felt, you know, deep sympathy for him, even when he was doing, you know, things that were, you know, were terrible. So you can really understand why he does the things that he does. And Troy Tradup also does a great job of just building up a picture of this small Minnesota town, so that, you know, the various kind of personalities and things like that in the town, the police chief and librarian and things like that. You really get a sense of this community. And, you know, Troy's friends as well. So there's, you know, his best friend and his best friend's mother play, you know, a really big part in the book. And they were all really convincing characters. So, yeah, it was a really entertaining blend of that kind of coming of age story, which I think is always emotionally satisfying, and, you know, a kind of fairly traditional werewolf novel. So the werewolf aspects were really entertaining. It's quite gory at times. It's never a kind of terrifying book, but it's definitely horrifying in places. And, you know, you really feel for Brandon as you know, his powers develop, and he feels, you know, kind of compelled to use them in ways that he shouldn't do. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed it, and I really didn't know where it was going to go either. But the ending is very satisfying. So yeah, I thought it was a really, really good book. And what I don't want to say is, this sounds like I'm damning it with faint praise to say that it's just a really good, you know, kind of standard, enjoyable novel. It doesn't try and do anything exceptional. It's not, you know, kind of experimental in its style or anything like that. But it's just very, very well written. You know, the prose is extremely readable, and all the components of it, you know, the setting, the characters, the events, you know, the horror, the emotion, you know, there's humour in it as well. All of those things just blend perfectly together in just the right, you know, just the right balance to make a really, really satisfying and enjoyable book. So another one that I really, really recommend. Okay, time for a random book from the shelves. So this is another independently published book, which I read a few years ago, The Maiden Voyage and Other Departures by Jessica McHugh. This is a fascinating book. So it's a collection. It's one of those books that's a collection of short stories that kind of are all interrelated and come together to form an overall narrative. And it's about a world where humans coexist with kind of human bee hybrids, which sounds very strange, and it is very strange. But Jessica McHugh takes it in really interesting directions, and I found it a really, really entertaining and fascinating book. I thought it was really, really clever, and I really enjoyed it. So I hope you enjoyed that. Do let me know if you've read any really good self-published or independently published books recently. I think there's so much fantastic stuff out there. And when we just go into, kind of bookstores and things like that, we miss it. So I think it's really important to look for it, because there are some wonderful books out there which you wouldn't chance across in a Barnes & Noble or whatever. But yeah, anyway, thank you very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.